So I am very excited to welcome Saleem Zaru, who is the Executive Director of the United Palestinian Appeal, or UPA. Now, after 45 years, 1978, the United Palestinian Appeal continues to empower the Palestinians to improve their lives and communities through programs in health, education, economic development, and outreach. And as director of the UPA, Saleem manages 5 geographical areas of the UPA. So he travels between Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Jordan, and Washington, D.C., where his effective leadership has vastly expanded the UPA's ability to provide support to these vulnerable Palestinian communities. Many of these are refugee camps. Saleem grew up in Ramallah and attended Ramallah Friends School. He graduated from Earlham College, and he also studied at the American University of Beirut and the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. Now, with his firsthand knowledge and understanding of the social and political environment in the Middle East, he lends his broad range of experience to both local and international economic development efforts. Saleem is also clerk of the Ramallah Friends meeting. So for months, the Peace Committee has been eagerly awaiting the time to meet Saleem and hear his talk. And with the recent events in the Middle East, we find this topic particularly important and relevant. And we hope he will show us better how to witness for peace and compassion in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you again. I am delighted to be here, and thank you for your kind words, although you shouldn't believe most of them.
Well, I know they're facts.
I am happy to be here, and I am thankful for your interest and commitment to this type of work. And I want to thank John for being diligent about making this happen. And I am sorry it's been difficult to commit, but I'm glad we're finally here. And it's just been too many moving pieces for the last few months. But anyway, I want to tell you a little bit about UPA. I have a short video, maybe 3-minute video, to show you the first 40 years of UPA's work. And then I will talk a little bit about the last 5 years, and then give you a chance to ask any questions or make any comments or whatever. UPA is the oldest Palestinian American humanitarian organization serving the Palestinian people. It was started in 1978 in New York by a group of Palestinian American professionals who wanted to find an independent platform for channeling support to Palestinians in Palestine and in the refugee camps and the diaspora that is a credible and an independent organization. Back in the 70s, all civil societies, organizations in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Jordan, even a lot of them in the US were politically affiliated. That was the time when a lot of political organizations did their work through humanitarian organizations because they were not allowed to do it otherwise. And UPA's board of directors was adamant when it was established, and the charter of UPA is very clear about this being a non-political, non-sectarian organization. And it continues to be so. And I remember a story that when I was recruited, they told me the story about how serious they are about this not being political. They told me a story back in the early 80s. Somebody made a donation of $1 million.
Wow.
They received a check for $1 million, and they were so happy. And it was in those days, I think UPA's budget was maybe $150,000 a year. So that was a big donation. And 2 days later, they realized that that $1 million came from this individual who is really a front for a political organization. So they took the $1 million and gave it back, and they said, UPA is not for sale. So that's something I am proud. I was excited to hear when they told me the story. That's before they hired me. And I am happy to repeat it because that, you know what they say, it's your no's that make your yeses credible. And when they said no, it's when they say yes and take a gift from somebody, you know, it's going to be used in the proper way and all that. So that's one of these stories, and there's a lot of these anecdotes, but I'm not going to get into them. But anyway, I was approached by a board member back in, I think it was 2010, to lead the organization just after I had retired from land acquisition and development, which is what I did for a very long time. And I was surprised. I said, I think you have the wrong person. I know nothing about the nonprofit world. And they said, we know that. That's why we are talking to you. So I said, okay, I will help you for a year. I will volunteer to help you. At that time, UPA has been functioning for 32 years. And just like a lot of Arab American charities, you know, they were struggling and they were trying to make a difference just like everybody else. And it's like going uphill, and the board didn't know, you know, what are they gonna do to make a change? So anyway, we talked about this, and I said, look, I don't know how to run nonprofits. I know how to run companies. If you like, we can make this a nonprofit, but we can run it profitably. And they said, it's a nonprofit. And I said, yeah, we can run it profitably. And that's what we continue to do. So we look at the bottom line, but at the same time, we look at the overheads, which is very important in nonprofits. Our overheads for the last 5 or 8, 7 years, maybe, are 2% of our program expenses, which is unheard of in the nonprofit world. So, and that's running a nonprofit profitably. So I'm proud to say that, and I hope we set an example for other charities, which I don't like that term, and I'll talk about this for a minute, in a minute. So anyway, again, when I was approached, they said, we want to talk to you about UPA, and I said, what is UPA? And they said, UPA is a small charity that supports the Palestinian refugees and Palestinian people. I said, I don't want to work for a charity. And they said, why not? This is a good cause. I said,
Excuse me, Saleem.
yeah,
Could Saleem stay closer to the owl? We're having trouble hearing him.
this one here.
Oh,
And there's some high price seats here.
Open.
Well, yeah.
You didn't talk to us like you're.
No.
That's.
Oh, the mic, okay, sure. Okay. Yeah.
I'll just ask for the picture.
There's another space up there.
Thank you. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
If you have trouble hearing, please move up here. Seats up here.
Yeah, I think this
Up here.
bridges that gap. Now, how far back do you want me to start?
Nonprofit, why didn't you work for?
Oh, yeah, I didn't want to work for a charity, no. And I said, I don't want to work for a charity, and they said, why not? And I said, because just that term creates inequality between a giver and a receiver of service or of funds or whatever. We are not on equal grounds with the people we're trying to serve. And to our board at the time, 12 years ago, that was a new concept. The first, when UPA was first established, the mission was UPA works to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. And that was a very noble thing to do back in 1978. People wanted to alleviate the suffering because there is a lot of suffering. There was a lot of suffering. I think, unfortunately, there will continue to be a lot of suffering. But alleviating suffering by itself is not enough. And I'll get to that concept after we look at that short film. That idea of alleviating suffering versus being more proactive, this is such a reactive state of mind. Is the concept that drove our strategic planning for the last 5 years. And that took the organization to different levels of involvement, different levels of programming, and different levels of program investment and program expenses. So let me stop here. Let's look at the first 40 years of United Palestinian Appeals work, and then I'll pick it up after we look at this short film.
In 1978, a group of Palestinian American business people and community leaders came together to establish United Palestinian Appeal, a charitable nonprofit organization that would set out to provide immediate relief to Palestinians in Palestine and refugee camps in the Middle East. 4 years later, in 1982, UPA would confront its darkest hour yet. News of the Sabra and Shatila massacre traveled around the world, and the UPA family quickly honored its responsibility and raised funds for a local hospital in Beirut, supporting victims of the massacre. UPA's response to the massacre would soon mark a turning point, culminating in the establishment of the Emergency Relief Fund to respond efficiently and effectively to crises impacting Palestinians. The Emergency Relief Fund has since responded to many crises. These include the First Intifada and repeated Israeli assaults on Gaza, the tragic harbor explosion in Beirut, and the outbreak of COVID-19. Throughout the 1980s, in the aftermath of the massacre, UPA pursued long-term projects aimed at building the capacity of Palestinians to overcome crises and live dignified lives. These include the construction of Al-Maqasid College of Nursing in Jerusalem, UPA's child sponsorship program, which has since developed into the Children's Fund, and the University Scholarship Program, known today as the Mahmoud Darwish Scholarship Fund. In 1989, UPA became the first Palestinian American organization eligible for the United States Combined Federal Campaign. And for the last 8 years, Charity Navigator has given UPA its highest rating for financial health, accountability, and transparency. UPA also meets all 20 Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance standards. By its 15th anniversary, UPA implemented humanitarian programs worth more than $1.3 million benefiting Palestinians and continued to raise funds throughout the 1990s to expand its programs in community and economic development, education, as well as health and wellness. Thus, in 1995, UPA facilitated the donation and delivery of the first mammography machine in the West Bank, benefiting the Ramallah Hospital. These milestones were soon followed by UPA's implementation of the Emergency Employment Generation Project in partnership with USAID, completed in 2004. Over the years, UPA grew from a charity initiative into a reputable humanitarian and development organization. Today, our work ranges from supporting childcare centers and community sports facilities to providing support to local hospitals and the launch of our small business development program, as well as mental health services in the Gaza Strip. More than 40 years later, the UPA family in Washington, D.C., and our field offices in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Jordan remain committed to the promise of transforming Palestinian lives and empowering their communities.
Thank you. So I'd like to go back to 2018, which was marked our 40th anniversary. And obviously this film goes back to 2018. And after that anniversary, we started a conversation, an internal conversation starting with our board of directors, and then it was taken out to all our stakeholders, our partners, our employees, our donors, everybody, about what does it mean to have UPA today? For 40 years, it was doing pretty much the same kind of work, different programs, but the same philosophy, the charity model and all that. So I wrote a paper that drove the conversation for moving the strategic planning forward, for rethinking UPA's philosophy, and also having a different mindset when we're talking about UPA programs. So I will read you some of these. I mean, this is a very long document. I pulled out a few paragraphs from it that would reflect the essence of the way of thinking that we followed through. So let's see. I typed it in big font, but I still can't see it.
Familiar.
Yeah. So The year 2018 marked United Palestinian Appeal's 40th anniversary. That was an important milestone and a bittersweet moment in UPA's history. Sweet due to the organization's longevity demonstrated by the test of time. Bitter because the organization's services after 40 years are just as much needed as they were when it was first established. The growth and development of United Palestinian Appeal reflects the predicament that the Palestinian people continue to face. Despite these challenges, or perhaps as a result of them, in 2019, we started an internal dialogue at UPA, examining our mission, our purpose, and questioning the meaning of our work. Our original mission of alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people has been and continues to be fulfilled every day through our projects and programs. However, alleviating suffering alone does not often address the structural inequalities and injustice that cause this suffering. The reality is, under siege, occupation, and in exile, human rights continue to be compromised. Development is quite difficult, and sustainable development is almost impossible. Through a healthy evolution of UPA's of the organization, UPA's leadership realized that contributing to long-term socioeconomic and cultural development of Palestinian communities requires more than just alleviating suffering through charity. It requires actions guided by social responsibility demonstrated by UPA and other like-minded organizations. Whereas charity attempts to alleviate the symptoms of substandard living, socially responsible development guided by the pursuit of social justice will address the cause of it. Without this approach, we will run the risk of UPA becoming part of a moderate bureaucracy, prioritizing the civility and formality of our industry at the expense of the very marginalized community we intend to serve. One might rightly argue that there will always be people that are of lesser means because of their own doing. This is true, but on the other hand, there are many who have no chance whatsoever at advancing in life or improving their conditions because of unjust social structures such as racism, political oppression, corruption, uneven educational opportunities, and other inequalities fostered by the manipulation of power and wealth. Since Nakba, disadvantages of the Palestinian people have never been so obvious as they have been in recent times. This reality inspires UPA to play a leadership role in a call to action in pursuit of socially responsible development and to move into the public sphere to demand and promote change. Considering the enormity of this challenge and the seriousness of the undertaking, this public sphere, both within Palestinian society and on a global level, must be of equivalent magnitude. By empowering Palestinians to address the root causes of social injustice, both within their own society and beyond, UPA will equip Palestinians with sustainable tools, education, skills, resources, technology, and connections to survive amid a turbulent political and economic environment. UPA has the vision, organizational breadth and depth, and leadership to mobilize, motivate, and energize organizations and individuals to move in that direction. More importantly, building on UPA's 45 years of service to the Palestinian people, UPA has the moral obligation to do so. Tragically, the people we serve have seen very little in terms of the evolution of humanity. Life for Palestinian refugees in Gaza and elsewhere is a witness to that. Yet our role continues to focus on cultivating hope within the communities we serve, creating opportunities where people can imagine a better future beyond their daily reality. As we strive to stay true to this vision, we reflect on our mission and search for purpose in our work in an environment torn by violence and numbed by injustice. We often find ourselves drawing strength, and inspiration from the communities we serve, thus finding meaning in our work, obligation in self-evaluation, and stamina in progress. United Palestinian Appeal is a vibrant and robust organization. It has withstood the test of time and will demonstrate the vigor and elasticity of action towards transformation. Thank you. Thank you. So we can elaborate on this a little bit if you want. The main ideas, what we are talking about is the moving away from appeal to action. So United Palestinian Appeal, at one time throughout our strategic planning process, we were thinking we were going to call it United Palestinian Action. And then we realized that if we apply for this name change, they could study it and say, okay, you can go functioning till we decide on this, or they could say, okay, you could stop functioning now till we decide on this. So we did not go through with it, but the idea was moving from appeal to action, from charity to solidarity. And these are the two ideas that are driving our thought process today, from the board to the staff, to our staff overseas, to our partner organizations, and everything like that. So I think this was the right approach. I think that the organization to different levels of programming and different levels of fundraising, and different levels of effectiveness in our programming. And I want to give you, in the last 5 years, we have some really good programs that demonstrate this. And I want to give an example with a few of them. We have a program called the Small Business Development Program, and we launched that in Gaza back in 2015. And it was such a tiny program. And what we do with that is we get young men and women who have not been able to find a job for the last 4 or 5 years. We put them through a class of how to run a small business. Now, these kids are high school graduates, but they have no opportunity. They don't have any funds to go to school. And even if they did, they had no opportunity for employment. So we trained them for 3 weeks how to run a small business. And then we give them an in-kind grant to start a business that at the end of the class, they wrote a proposal for. So they say, I want to start a little, I don't know, restaurant or a food cart or some, whatever it is. And they could range from $1,000 to $3,000 without an exception, except for one kid who got imprisoned. All these kids were successful, and we monitored them for a year. And most of them in a year, all the guys are getting married. So that is a sign of they can afford it, they can raise a family, and that just changes not only their economic status. Nobody's getting rich on this little project. Nobody's getting rich, but people are putting food on the table, and what this does is change their self-image. They can provide, a lot of them are supporting either their parents or their extended families or whatever. And that just changes everything for them. And that's one simple way to cultivate hope. And there are a lot of examples like this. We work with the farmers along the same basis. We have a program that we work with the fishermen in Gaza. We had a program that was called Illuminating Gaza, one harbor at a time. Gaza is a fishing community, and they have all these fishing harbors. And of course, when you're a fisherman, most of your work is done at night. But they have no electricity, they cannot, it was very dangerous and all that. And what we did a 3-year-long solar energy, lighting these harbors with solar energy. Unfortunately, all these are not working anymore. They're recently were demolished. All the solar towers, all that. But for a while, that sustained the fishermen in a very good way, utilizing solar energy and made them more profitable and safe. So a lot of these things go a long way. It doesn't have to be $1 million. It could be a couple $1,000. It'll make a big difference in somebody's life and their family's life and things like that. In Jordan, there are refugee camps that are run by UNRWA, which is the caregiver supposedly for Palestinian refugees. However, UNRWA does not call them Palestinian refugees, calls them Palestine refugees, which means those that left Palestine in 1948 after the establishment of the State of Israel. So UNRWA works with these guys, which are dying off, And I think this is an exit strategy for the UN agency to say, that's it, we're done. But there are camps that were established in 1967, and these are refugees that fled mostly Gaza during the 1967 war. And these camps are not supported by UNRWA. And if they're not supported by UNRWA, they're not supported by the Jordanian government. So these kids cannot go to government schools, cannot go to government hospitals, cannot have healthcare, cannot have social security services. They're living on the periphery of life. And what we feel we can do is work with these groups that are the most marginalized within the Palestinian refugee population. And there is one camp that has 32,000 inhabitants. It's called Jerash camp. It's in Jerash, the Roman city in Jordan. And the nickname of it is Gaza camp, because all these people came from Gaza. So it's called the Gaza camp. 32,000 people. They have a clinic that operates 2 afternoons a week with a doctor and a nurse for 4 hours and 4 hours the next day. 32,000 people. So what we did a few years ago, we purchased property in the camp, and we built a building in the camp. It was funded by the Japanese government. And we created a community center there where we provide, and the reason we didn't have to build the building, we didn't have to purchase land, but that was a way to tell the community, we are here to stay, we are invested in you. We are not coming to give you a small grant, we're not coming to, it's not a one-time thing. We are invested in building community. And that community center is the only public space that they have in the camp. We later purchased a piece of property next to it, and that's the only open space in the camp. The camp is, I think it's a 1 kilometer square, which is less than a 1 square, and 32,000 people. No open space. People come and sit in this open lot that we have. We put in some trees and things, and they think of it as an oasis, which really is just a few trees, but that's the level of misery there is. And that little piece of property makes a big difference in their lives. We have home out of that center. We have tutoring for kids, because the UNRWA schools in the area, which these kids try to go to, they have 3 sessions. So we have kids going from 8 to 10, you have kids going from 10 to 12, and kids going from 12 to 2. So instead of going 6 or 8 hours to school, you're going 2 hours. So we get kids in the 5th grade to this tutoring program. They can't read or write. How are they going to succeed in life? So there is this tutoring center. There is elderly care center. There is home nursing care, because people have no access to health care. We have home nursing care for people who are bedridden. And they go, and nurses go and visit them. The doctor goes every other week, or whatever they need. And this is how you build hope for these people. This is just knowing, knowing that somebody cares about you goes a long way. When you are vulnerable and somebody extends a helping hand, that goes a long way. It's the effect of it is so deep, and they start helping others, and it's it's got a ripple effect that is unbelievable. Anyway, I can go on, and we have a lot of these programs and a lot of things that I left some annual reports there that have a lot of details about programs and what we do and our financials and everything else. I'm happy to go on, but I'd like to give you a chance if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer them if I know the answer, and if not, I'll do my best to make it up.
Yes. The camp that you mentioned, Anwar, is that what it's called?
The camp,
Yeah, I mean, the refugees, they moved there in 1948, and so that population.
the camp that we work in camps that are established or that were established. I think I'll just get closer to this. We work with camps. Is that okay?
That does not amplify the room.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay. All right. Our priority is working in Jordan, is working with camps that were established in 1967, because these are underserved. In the West Bank, in Gaza, and in Lebanon, we work with camps that were established in 1948, because there are no camps in those areas that were established in 1967. The refugees in 1948, all of Gaza, or 90% of the inhabitants of Gaza, 2.3 million, 90% of them are refugees that moved to Gaza in 1948. There's 7 camps in Gaza, and we work with all of them. But in Jordan, we can't do everything. We focus on the camps that have absolutely no services. And the others, we try to fill gaps where UNRWA is. UNRWA it's UNRWA, it's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. So this is a UN agency that strictly provides work. They try to place them in find some menial jobs and relief, which is again one sort of charity. And to go back to that concept, what this does is create dependency and entitlement. And these are two things that you get a human being addicted to: entitlement and dependency. I think that's the end of them. And that's what we try to stay away from.
Questions? Does anyone have a question? Please, here.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary Leonard from Delphi Friends. Could you talk about how some of your programs in Gaza right now are being affected by the war? Thank you.
You're welcome.
And let me add to that, the effect, can you describe the effect of the blockade on the projects that UBA is doing?
Okay. I will talk about the blockade because it precedes the most recent things. And the blockade is, it's been going on for 16 years. This is the 16th year. It is the total restriction on the movement of people and goods. Several years ago, this was done in some kind of, it was a secret, but what the Israelis calculated is what it takes, how many calories it would take per human being to survive, just to not die. And that's the amount of food that was allowed to go into Gaza. And then I think a couple of international human rights organizations learned about this, and it was such a huge controversy. They improved it a little bit. They said, okay, instead of, I don't know, 500 calories a day, we're gonna give them 560. They don't want them to gain too much weight. So this is the extent of the blockade. The other thing is, the other things that the blockade is affected by. Gaza is a farming community and a fisherman's community. And they produce fish for the whole West Bank and Gaza. Now, what is done with that, or with the agricultural products, is they get them. Gaza is very hot, it's very hot. Several years ago, a group of investors built cold storage on the border between Israel and Gaza. So these farmers could put their agricultural products. And so they get them there, waiting a permit to get it out, because Gaza has no contact to the outside world, except through this one crossing. So they put it there, or the fish, or whatever, and then the Israelis shut the electricity off. And 2 or 3 days later, they say, okay, now you got your permit. By then, the tomatoes are rotten, the fish is, as you could smell it a mile away, and this is what that blockade does. Universities, there are universities in Gaza, and people can go there, but people sometimes want to learn something else. They want to go to Birzeit University, or they want to go to Bethlehem University, or a nursing school or something. They can't go. Teachers, when I was teaching at the university in Nablus in Palestine, I don't know, 500 years ago, we had colleagues from Gaza, and there came a time where they were not allowed to teach in the West Bank. So, every bit of daily life is affected by this blockade. People who need treatment, not all kinds of, if you have cancer in Gaza, that's a death sentence. The only place that treats cancer in the West Bank is the Lutheran World Federation Hospital in Jerusalem. And that's the only place they can get radiation or chemotherapy or whatever. They can't come. Some people need specialized surgery. They have to come to Maqasid Hospital in Jerusalem. They cannot come. So it's just anything you can think of. Life in all its aspects is disrupted with an intention to further marginalize and dehumanize the population. So that's that. As far as we're talking about the recent events, I have seen at least 4 wars in Gaza. The most recent one, I was there 2 days after the ceasefire, and I've seen the devastation and everything else, but I have never seen it as it is now. And the last war was 52 days. This war has been 6 days, but the amount of destruction is by far is absolutely unprecedented. The amount of kids that got killed in 3 days are half the kids that got killed in the Ukrainians. So this is the severity of the situation in Gaza. And it didn't start 16 years ago. It started 75 years ago. started back in 1948. All these people in Gaza left their homes. All these people in Gaza are refugees. Of course, there are original inhabitants in Gaza. There was a city and there are some families that were living there. But the majority of the population are refugees that came to Gaza in 1948. So this is just the longest occupation in history, the West Bank and Gaza. So I don't know if that, we will be. You wanted me to talk about the programs. The only program that is still functioning now, we have about 22 staff members in the Gaza office. 5 of them have left their homes because they were demolished. One person is missing in action. We can't track him. He and his family, we don't know. We hope we lost touch. He doesn't answer his phone. He doesn't get on the group call every day. We have a group call every day, 7 in the morning, to make sure everybody's safe and all that. So this one guy hasn't been on for the last 3 days, maybe. The only program we kept running is the hospital support program. 3 years ago, we established a program called the Fortifying the Palestinian Medical Sector. Because emergency is an ongoing state of life, we realized that it does not work when something like this happens to start procuring medical supplies and consumables and operating room, whatever they need, hoses and things. So we started this program and we invest about a couple of $1 million in it every year. And we attribute that to our strategic goal of emergency readiness, which came out of the strategic planning that we did. So this emergency readiness, we have constantly in stock in Gaza and the West Bank, locally procured pharmaceuticals and medical supplies and hospital consumables. So we could, and we say our intervention in times of emergency is quick, efficient, and effective. And we love to do what we say we're going to do. And for the last 3 days, 3 hospitals in Gaza received all they need from medical supplies and consumables, despite of the bombing. We had, of course, we couldn't get delivery trucks. We had to do this with their ambulances. We got their ambulances to the warehouse. They fill it up with what they need and we deliver them. Of course, it's all free. They don't pay anything. So a lot is affected by this. Our 2 major programs in Gaza is the Small Business Development Program, which is of course not operating now. And the second major program, which we have been running since 1915, and that's a program, I don't want to say endorsed, but for lack of a better word, by the American Psychological Association. We use American Psychological Association books to build a trauma-informed system of support around children. And we have an agreement with the APA to get these books, translate them to Arabic, make them culturally appropriate, not just literally translate them. And we work with caregivers of kindergarten children, their parents and their teachers. And this is a way to help them recognize all these kids have seen 4 wars now, and they are traumatized, and the parents and the teachers are not necessarily equipped or trained to recognize symptoms of trauma. So bedwetting is a symptom of trauma. acting up in class is a symptom of trauma. Among others, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but our mental health practitioners on the ground work with the caregivers to create this system of support around the children. And in Gaza, there are 322 kindergartens. And we've been working with them since 2015, after the 2014 war. We started that program. So that is going on. The first few days of the war went on remotely. People log in and talk to each other. But now there are no phones, there is no power, there is no internet, there is just, it does affect what we do, but we are adamant about keeping that healthcare component going because that's a matter of life or death.
Questions or comments?
Yes.
You entitled your talk Hope. So, you entitled the first word was hope
Yes,
in your title.
yes,
Could you elaborate a little bit more on ways to be hopeful?
absolutely.
And because I know that some ways of hope are the programs you've just talked about.
Yes,
Those offer hope
yes,
when you can get the power to run them
yes.
and to communicate with people. But could you
Sure,
give
sure.
us some of your
Yeah,
either examples of hope or just.
thank you. That's a good question. And it revolves around the theme and, look, the reason we emphasize this is people are resilient. People can lose their homes. People can lose their land, their loved ones, their kids, and people go on. People continue life, and the human mind is programmed in such a way we forget very easily. We forget things and we move on. All these things you can lose and you would continue. But if you lose hope, Janis Joplin, which I'm sure people in my generation know who she is. She said, hope is another word of having nothing else to lose. That's a very famous song. Now, some people to have hope when they are desperate. Desperate times require desperate measures, and they do desperate things. And we are trying to keep people that have lost hope, is to find other ways to cultivate that. For some young man who has not worked in 6 or 8 years or 7 years or whatever, to be able to put food on the table, to be able to get married and raise a family and support his family. God, if that's not hope, I don't know what is. Because that changed the mindset. Their self-worth is this big and then it becomes this big all of a sudden. So that is a way to cultivate hope. For a kid who is not able to go to school or goes to school but is not learning anything, you should see when they could write a sentence. For them, I mean, you just see their eyes light up, and it's like a revelation. And that opens doors for them. That opens doors that they could do something when they grow up and maybe finish school rather than drop out at 6th grade or something like that. That is hope for in the West Bank and in Gaza, there is a shortage of psychiatrists. Just like in any traditional community, mental health could be a taboo sometimes. And people don't want to see the psychiatrist. And there are no psychiatrists. Now we have a residency program in partnership with George Washington University and Georgetown University at the Bethlehem Psychiatric Hospital, where doctors could go there and specialize and become, after 4 years, qualified psychiatrists. Now that opens up a whole new life, not only for the doctor, but for a population who desperately needs community healthcare interventions. And that is another way of cultivating hope. The scholarship program for university kids. Tuition for a university student to go to almost any school in the West Bank or Gaza per year, it costs $25,000 to $3,000. I mean, in this country, that would be how much kids pay for their meal plan.
Yeah.
Or maybe it doesn't, maybe it's too little these days, I don't know. But that's such a small investment in somebody's future, giving them the opportunity to get a university degree where they could work, where they could become productive, better citizens. And some people argue, and I've been asked this question many times, if there are no jobs, why do you put them through universities and pay this money, and then they go out and they can't get a job? And my answer is because they become better human beings with education. So I'd rather have an unemployed population who is educated rather than an unemployed population who is ignorant. And that education is transformative. It changes the way you think, it changes the way you solve problems, the way you think about different things, and it's an investment in the human being, and that cultivates hope. So there's a lot of examples that cultivate hope, and it's not an equation, and it's not a destination. It is a lifelong journey of cultivating hope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Raise your hand if you'd like to make a question.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
When you mentioned that you had made a shift into action, can you say more about action?
Of course.
I mean, I attribute action to political or, real change in Judah's occurrence or to achieve sustainability and human dignity.
Of course.
How does that action look in your organization?
Thank you. That is a very important question. And that's one of the concerns that one of our board members raised when we brought the word action. They said, all of a sudden, we're going to become a political organization. And I said, no. Excuse me. So from appeal to action. And again, I really want to thank you for raising that question, because this is something I should have touched upon, because it's such an important concept of this of the mind shift, if you will. When you are in the mindset of an appeal, you are appealing to the inherent goodness of someone to give you a donation so you could do something with it. And that depends on whether they give it or they don't give it, or whether it's enough, or whether it covers your program expenses or your overheads or whatever. The action part is, and this is what we did, we created a department called the Institutional Partnership Department. And what this department does is work on needs assessment to look at what are the actual needs on the ground, write a narrative that justifies that need, and write a grant proposal for what we intend to do to address that need, and seek institutional funding for that need. That is, we are taking action. We are taking control of our own destiny by being proactive. We're saying there is a problem. This program that I mentioned a minute ago, the Fortifying the Palestinian Medical Sector, being proactive about having, if we didn't have these in our warehouse in Gaza, we wouldn't have been able to support these hospitals the last 3 days. That is being proactive, that is taking charge, that is not waiting to be reactive. So when there is a war, you start raising funds and maybe you'll get it in a month or two to what you need to do with it. And that's being proactive. That is the appeal versus action. That is the proactive being versus reactive. And so that department does a lot of this, a lot of institutional partnerships, a lot of grant opportunities to make something happen and not wait to, and again, the magnitude of the projects you could do with institutional partnerships is by far exceeds what you could do with individual donations, which are very, very important. But when I'll give you one example, but I don't want to, take too much of everybody's time on this. But 4 years ago, we were visiting Maqasid Hospital. Maqasid Hospital is the only Palestinian hospital in East Jerusalem. And I asked, and we have a long-term partnership with that hospital. If you saw the video, UPA built the School of Nursing for that hospital. And I asked the president of the hospital, I said, what is your biggest challenge? He said, our biggest challenge is we are hassled every day by the Israeli Ministry of Health. Now, because they're in Jerusalem, the Israeli Ministry of Health oversees that hospital and not the Palestinian Ministry of Health. We are harassed every day. We are threatened to be shut down because we are not functioning according to their standards. And I said, where are you lacking? And he said, that's the problem. They don't tell me. So they don't know where they're going wrong, and they just don't know what to do. So I said, who is the authorized entity that certifies hospital internationally? And he said, there's a company in Chicago called JCI, the Joint Commission International, and that certifies hospitals all over the world. Yes. And I said, thank you very much. I'll talk to you in a month. So I came back here, I went to Chicago, I talked to these guys, and we looked at their standards. We bought the standards that they qualify hospitals by. It took us 3 years, and that was a multi-million-dollar project to get that hospital past the JCI certification. That is proactive. That is taking charge by just
Going in a different direction to.
Yeah, this is the same certification that Hadassah Hospital has. They cannot challenge this. And this is bypassing them, not telling them where they go wrong. And God knows, when we did this, I mean, there's a lot of areas where they needed to improve. But that's being proactive. So that's a kind of thing. Yes.
Saleem, thank you. Saleem, I have been looking at maps and trying to figure out where is Palestine. And I know there's the whole question of the two-state company or two-state system.
Yeah.
But it's like, where, can you just describe to us, how do you know if his home is Palestinian or Israeli or Jordanian? I mean, like there's, and is it Gaza? Is it West Bank? Is it where?
Palestine is, historically, Palestine is the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel. That whole area in 1948, go to the internet and find a map that dates 1947 or 1822 or whatever, how far back you want to go. And it is Palestine. Up till 1948, and there was a UN resolution that called for the partition of Palestine. Now, in 1917, Lord Balfour, Lord Rothschild Balfour, who was a British politician, promised a Jewish homeland in Palestine to I forgot the name of the prevailing Jewish agency at the time, and that was the Balfour Declaration. And that's a known historic event that he did. At that time, Palestine was under the British occupation. So until 1948, there was Palestine, there was Transjordan, there was Greater Syria, and in 1948, the UN Declaration of Partitioning Palestine created Israel. If you look at the maps, and you could look them up on the internet, I don't have a way to show you here, but you would see the size of the land portion that was Israel in that became Israel in 1948. And you could see how it grew over the years. You would see now more than, I don't want to mislead you with the numbers because I don't remember the numbers, but if you look at it and they show it to you in two different colors, you see how the encroachment of one state over the rest of Palestine is. But Palestine historically is what is Israel now, what is the West Bank now, and what is Gaza now.
Well, where was Israel before 1948?
There was, Israel was established in 1948.
It's an idea since the 1880s.
Yeah, it's an idea, exactly, yes, sir.
Well, I'm not an expert on this, but I did read one book recently, last year about this topic.
Yeah.
And what was
You
interesting,
wanna-
there were other parts of the world that were considered as a home for Jewish people.
Right.
And they looked at, I think, someplace in Northern Africa, South America, etc.
Yeah,
I don't know how to work it.
it's worse.
I'll do.
That's.
Yeah,
So I
it
think
is,
point out that-
you're right, at the time, the international community, primarily the UK and the US at the time, and I'm sure France, and could have been Canada and Australia, all the countries that claim monopoly on colonialism. They were thinking of what it was called at the time is how to solve, including Germany, how to solve the Jewish problem. And do we put them in Africa? Do we expel them from Europe? Do we put them somewhere else? The poor Jews were the world's problem because nobody wanted them. And what happened in 1948, there was an agency called the United Palestine Appeal, not Palestinian, but Palestine Appeal. And what that agency did, oh, thank you.
Oh, man.
United Palestine Appeal is an agency that worked to bring Jews from Europe, from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from the Arab world, from Yemen, from Morocco, from Egypt, from Syria, to bring them over to Israel. And this is the map. I thank you for this map. You didn't just draw it, did you? This is, if you look at the green part, this is how Israel grew. Oh, sorry, the green part is how it was Palestine, and you'd see how Israel grew in that part of the world.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Here.
oh, all these fancy.
Oh, yeah.
Bowels.
Okay, yeah,
It's back.
thank you.
It's backwards.
It's backwards, okay.
Read it backwards. On the screen, it's backwards.
Yeah. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Sort of. Put that one up inside there.
Oh, did you?
But one of there's a book about why the two-state solution didn't work.
Mhm.
And in it, it reminds the fly in the ointment that's been the settlers. And there's a quote from Sharon about the whole path down the middle of the West Bank on all the hills. And he said, and this is back in the war, the one you mentioned in 67, yeah, he said, just go ahead and do it, you settlers. And the government was against it, the Israeli government. But they went ahead and did it. And it just happened, went down on all the hilltops coming down through the West Bank. That all these settlements, very modern condominiums. And Sharon just said, go ahead and take it because this is our land. And that was independent of the state of Israel and the government. So this is really very sticky problem.
It is. The sad thing is, you know who paid for it?
Yes.
All of us.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, good 50% of our taxes.
That's right.
I guess, sorry, if I can just ask, not to keep it going too much longer. One question I had was, how does an organization like EPA pivot at a time like this to support the emergency services that are now required since the unrest recently started or continued unrest? And then secondary to that question is, I understand that obviously there's no political affiliation, but what are strategies that UPA is able to use in the United States to remind folks of the plight of the Palestinian people, the needs there of that region, and whatever is necessary to encourage support to an organization like UPA, considering our country's historical relationship with Israel?
Thank you. The way UPA would pivot we have one of our programs, one of our long-term programs is called the emergency it used to be called relief, but again, relief is a word we stay away from. Response, the emergency response program. And in times of emergency, and they talked about it in the video, whether it was the bombing or the explosion in the Beirut harbor, whether it was the Intifada, whether it was all these emergencies, the massacre in Sabra and Shatila in 1982, where so-called Christians went in and massacred 3,200 human beings under the watch of the Israeli army. And this was actually, that was the start of UPA's interventions in Lebanon, because nobody was approaching these camps there. But anyway, the way we pivot is we activate our emergency response fund. And for this fund, not to start scrambling when there is an emergency, because you can't plan for an emergency, but the way we plan for, or we are ready for these emergencies, again, in the sense of being proactive rather than reactive, we started this 3 years ago, this Fortifying Palestinian Medical Sector program, where we stockpile medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, hospital consumables on an ongoing basis. We support these hospitals throughout the year, whether it's an emergency or not, but we are constantly, there is something in the pipeline to keep these stocks available. And when this took place a week ago, it was like that. Yes.
So sorry, for the things that you've already had in the warehouse before this happened, obviously you're able to tap into those supplies at a time like this. But considering the problems that they're having right now with the border closures, and we don't know how long this current event might last, is there a way for you to get new supplies in?
Well, we could get new supplies. To get them in, it takes more than UPA's ability. I'm going next week to meet with people in the Jordanian government and the Egyptian government.
Okay.
And we hopefully will be able to get through, both the Jordanians and the Egyptians have somewhat good relations with the Israelis. And we've gotten stuff there before through them. And that's what we're trying to do now. Yes, sir.
Is it possible for you to continue this work by working with, for instance, Egypt and Jordan, without also working with Hamas? And is it too fraught to separate what UPA does from Hamas's action, which some of us find especially repugnant?
Yes, very good. By law, we as an American organization, which we are, by law, there is the no contact policy with anybody on the US, the UN, the UK, Canadian lists. These are lists of undesired organizations and individuals, which Hamas is one of them. By law, we cannot work with Hamas. If we do, we will be shut down. Not that we want to. But so that by definition, we don't do that. And I'll give you an example. Our office in Gaza has been approached many, many times by the Ministry of Health, by the Ministry of Education, by the ministry, saying, look, you have to register with the Gaza government. And we say, look, we don't recognize that there is a West Bank government and a Gaza government. We recognize that we are registered as a US entity working in Palestine, and we have a permit for that. We recognize that we are registered in Jordan, in Lebanon, and we're even registered in Israel. Because when we import pharmaceuticals and medical supplies to our warehouse in Ramallah, it comes through Israeli ports. So we are registered as an entity in Israel. But we refuse to get that registration in Gaza because we say, look, we are registered in Palestine. This is our registration, and this two governments we don't deal with. And they come the following year, and it just, we have ways to avoid that. But yes, we don't have to work with Hamas, and we don't. Now, to bypass this, there is in education and in health, there is, what we do is coordinate with the Palestinian Ministry of Health and the Palestinian Ministry of Education in Ramallah. So if we want to do something that has to do, that needs any like a permit or something, we obtain that from the Ramallah Ministry of Health and the Ramallah Ministry of Education rather than the Gaza. Now, if we work with the Jordanians and the Egyptians, it is just to facilitate the movement of goods. But we go to Gaza, and our work with Gaza is not with government hospitals. Our work in Gaza is with non-government organizations hospitals. So we work with the Red Crescent, which is the equivalent of the Red Cross. We work with a lot of local NGOs that run a hospital or a primary care clinic. Or our biggest healthcare partner in Gaza is the Christian organization. Is not the Lutheran. Well, we work with the Anglican hospital.
World Relief.
Not World Relief. We work with the God. I mean, this is one of these senior moments here. Near East Council of Churches. They have 4 primary care clinics that work throughout Gaza, and we are one of our biggest supporters. We are one of their biggest supporters, and so we work with them. We work with the Anglican Hospital, Al Ahli Al Arabi Hospital, that has been in Gaza. That Near East Council of Churches has been in Gaza since 1952. The hospital has been in Gaza since probably, I'd say 1936, the Anglican hospital. So we have really very credible partners and very much embedded in the local community and all that. Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah.
And UPA is so fortunate to have you at the head.
I want that in writing.
It's coming, it's coming. This is a time of hope in a hopeless situation.
Yes.
We're looking for hope. And this is not exactly dealing with UPA, but what do you think are the chances for a ceasefire? And what can we do to promote that? We've been told to contact our Congress people, that it's going to be countries around the world that are going to have to force or have to convince Israel that they need to have a ceasefire. And I don't know if there's any other element in Gaza that can negotiate with Israel other than Hamas? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important question as well. And I think the question, first of all, if there is ever a negotiation, it will not happen with Hamas. There usually, in these situations, there's an intermediary. So it will be the Egyptians or the Jordanians or the PA, the Palestinian Authority, or somebody, the Qataris, the Saudis now want to jump on the bandwagon. Everybody wants to represent one of the factions there. I don't think it'll be Hamas, because I think Israel will not negotiate with Hamas. The international community will not negotiate with Hamas. And they will negotiate with an intermediary who would probably, in a way, be representing Hamas's interests. And this happened in the past. The question, though, is regardless whether it's the Jordanians, the whoever does it, that is not the question. The question is, how long will it last? And the answer to that, as long as we are putting band-aids on a situation like this, it's gonna erupt in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, whatever it is. And I'll tell you why. The Oslo Agreement, the essence of that agreement, and everybody was proud about it, and everybody, they had all these signing agreements and Wide River and here and there and all that. It was land for peace. And that was the Israeli suggestion. And the Palestinians, Arafat, signed it and said, yeah, that's fine, land for peace. Now, as we all know, from this map, nobody gave land and nobody got peace. The problem also is Palestinians don't want land. They want freedom. They want equality. They want dignity. And they don't want land. They have land. They have, now half of it is gone, or more than 90% of it is gone. But like I said before, if you lose your land, if you lose your home, your loved one, you continue. But what happens is where they are today, they have lost hope because there is no justice in the situation. And we all know, I don't think anyone in this room would disagree that if you want to work for peace, you got to work for justice. And unless we can achieve that, unless some guy living in Gaza could get in his car and drive to Ramallah and back without any restrictions, anything less than that is not freedom. If somebody wants to go to Birzeit University, they can't do that, that's not freedom. So this is the thing, we are negotiating and we are using the wrong tools. We are giving people, and see, the thing is, there is always somebody negotiating on behalf of the Palestinians. There is somebody that assumes always that I know how to get it right this time. Somebody always claims that, whether it's the US, whether it's Arafat, whether it's, you gotta find what the people want and address that. We have to think like radicals. And a radical is not somebody with a bomb in his pocket. A radical is somebody who looks at the root cause of a problem. It comes from a Greek word, which I can't remember. But we have to think radically, and we have to think what the root cause of the problem is, and that is justice. And unless we can deliver that, it's been going on since 1940, 75 years. And you know how many treaties, how many UN resolutions have been there to give the Palestinians their so-called rights. And first of all, none of them were implemented. None of them were respected by the international community or anybody else. But none of them address the root cause of the problem. And unless we do that, unless we find it in our hearts, and by our hearts, I mean the people that's sitting at the negotiating table, this will be prolonged another however long, and it'll erupt again. Because people, you know, we're talking here this morning in meeting, we're talking about people being disturbed, about being angry, and we're living 7,000 miles away, and we're hearing about it. And people are disturbed, and they are not at peace with it, and they are thinking, you know, how do I overcome this ill feeling? I know people that have been living in the same shelter in a refugee camp, which is a 4-meter by 4-meter room, which is 12 feet by 12 feet, since 1952. I mean, that is, in this day and age, human beings should not have to live like that. And unless these, not just personal freedoms, but collective freedom that involves a whole society, unless it is established and respected, I think it will be another problem.
What can we as the Friends meeting do?
You can raise awareness about the concept of, everybody talks about peace. Everybody talks about the peace process. Everybody talks about the two-state solution being a way to achieve peace. But what we need to do is raise awareness that if you want peace, you have to work for justice. I think that's very simple.
And contact your senators and your member of Congress. Jamie Raskin and Cardin and Van Hollen. Van Hollen recently was in the West Bank, and he's very disturbed at what he saw in terms of the separate violence. We need to support his concerns that he's raised. I know I think, I just wanted to say, I wanted to express my appreciation to Saleem for his talk and the questions from the audience. And I'm sure he'll, after we adjourn, if there's anyone that has an additional question for him, he'd be happy to answer it. But let's thank Saleem for his presentation.